Well, yeah, thanks for inviting me today to the call. So my name's Darren Barker. I'm a senior principal digital consultant working for Mott MacDonald. Um, so what I want to talk about today is how we're looking to optimize our project deliveries and projects that we work on within the company. So today's agenda will just be setting the scene, an introduction, how we are addressing the challenge, how we validate our deliverables, and then a summary and some closing notes. So just to set the scene, so what we find now within the industry is there's an exponential increase in the capability of new modeling tools that are coming up. We find there's a comprehensive BIM adoption, but there's a lack of standardization, which we feel impacts efficiency. And also there's a varied I suppose skill set and client maturity that also impacts our ability to deliver efficiently. So that's generally based on the clients that we work with may have a very mature client or a not so mature client. We're also trying to transition to data more and also trying to increase our checking approaches to actually validate the data we're providing our clients. There's also constant change requiring constant coordination, as in design changes without the available time. So certainly of the larger projects we work on, we're trying to drive down how we can improve that constant redesign, constant re-coordination across our projects. So as I said earlier, the risk that we find is that the client maturity generally changes now at the beginning and at the end of the project. So the issue that we find is just trying to keep up with that maturity. What the project ambition is, so what the drive is to try and improve efficiency. The projects we work on, we're always trying to look at what are the next steps, take lessons learned from our previous project, and then take that on to the next project. And also training and having the right support to drive this adoption. We find that changes depending on the size of the project and also the skill sets that we have on our projects. We also have the diversity of clients and project names, which means that we need to do the same. We need to be diverse as well. We're trying to take a data first approach, but that can be complex given the amount of data that we have. So we're trying to standardize how we deliver our projects, and I'll touch on that later. And also the more complex the projects are getting, we're finding now everyone's trying to implement BIM on their projects, and they have a different level of requirements, different level of skill sets are needed to actually work on those projects and deliver their needs. So how are we addressing this challenge? So LOD is a common term within the industry. What I've found over the last 5 years, it is not very well defined, if at all. Certainly the projects we work on, they vary from stations to lots of non-linear infrastructure. When we say things are standardized, and I hear it a lot when I attend presentations, attend seminars, personally, I don't think it is. So our LOD is what we're trying to define, or what we have defined for all projects that we work on. We're trying to define a benchmark or a baseline that we can then take onto new projects that come into the office. So we understand there's always different requirements on projects, but that doesn't necessarily need to mean we need to reinvent the wheel every time we start something. So, and also the understanding of what LOD is. So we've gone through an exercise within our business to actually educate the teams on what LOD is, depending on what stage of project's at. So we don't people modeling nuts and bolts, and also we don't want people modeling nothing. That you can either get too much or you get too little. So that's where we're taking the approach of defining it to a so granular level of detail that there's kind of no arguing that that's what we need to do. So what we try and do now when we have projects that come into the office, we always take best practices from previous projects. So we've defined what we call a component catalog, and that defines our LOD 400, which for us is detailed design. So it's developed for each discipline. We've developed an in-house model validation tool, so it actually checks that what we said we deliver from that component catalog or within that component catalog is actually what are in our models. We use a digital library, so we've got an in-house tool called Moata Intelligent Content. The reason for this tool was we find that projects we work on, we use the same component next time in the next project. It may be like an air handling unit, it may be a switch for some MEP equipment. So why do we need to keep remodeling that? element every time we have a new project. So we're trying to develop our digital library to contain those components. And again, they're all to that component catalog. So they're all to LOD4. So we're not having to rework everything every time we have another project in the office. And also our clients now, they want us to report on our models, they want quantities. They want to know how many piles they've got. They want to know how much concrete they've got. So by having that efficiency in having a component catalog, having our standard components and having tools that actually validate what we've delivered is compliant, we can remove the manual takeoff now. We can just run scripts from the models and we can pull those quants out as and when they're needed. Now for us, if we go back 3 years, none of this was possible because LOD was a known, but it wasn't that well developed. So this is what our component catalog looks like. It's just an example. This is our definition of what we class as LOD 400. It gives our clients a clear representation of what they're going to get when they receive our models. And also they can then inform their end client as to what they're going to receive when they receive our models. So it lists every graphical component we've modeled on a project. And it doesn't matter what that is. It shows the non-graphical data and the graphical data that sits behind these models, and it covers all disciplines. This is key for us because one thing that isn't, as I said earlier, isn't well defined is the LOD stages. So by us defining this early on a project before we even start modeling, get agreement from the client that this is what they're going to receive, means there's no surprises at the end of the project or when we start sharing models. To us, getting this agreed by our client is the first thing we try. One of the first things we try and do. It's key because the last thing we want is to deliver all of our models to our client and then they start rejecting them based on their understanding is different than ours. So also one of the things I mentioned earlier was our digital library that we have. We've developed this over a number of projects now. It's pretty much a plug-in direct to the software that we use, and we use a mixture of Revit, Civil 3D, and Bentley software, and this plugs into those applications. So, and what it allows us to do is just to click and place the method. All the information from the models are already in there. Some of these are parametric, and a lot of these components, they're parametric, which means we can also reduce the amount of drawings that we're delivering. So, for example, one of the projects we're on, it's got hundreds of culverts on there. We don't need to produce hundreds of drawings. We can have a standard detail and then supplement that with lots of schedules instead of having a drawing for every culvert. So that comes down to looking at efficiency. How can we be more efficient? Even though we're implementing BIM in all of our projects, how can we make it more efficient? And we have felt, and it's certainly paid dividends for us, is by having this digital component catalog and our digital library. Today, it's about £3.5 million. I think recently, probably by the end of the year, we'll be up to about £4.5 million saving. And that saving is based on someone not having to create that component every time they need it. Just an example of one of our culverts. It is a click and place, fill in a few dimensions. We can generate schedules from these. I say they're all parametric, skewed beams, culverts, anything that's standard, we just place into our digital libraries. So it's all well and good defining LOD for, and when we did for the project that we're working on now, we need to be able to validate the information that we're giving our client within our models, because it's great having that component catalog saying your pile is going to contain all this information, but how do you actually validate the fact that it does? How do you actually check it? So there wasn't a tool within the market that we could use. So we developed our in-house tool, just a model-based checking tool. We have around 4,000 models on our current project. That alone would be impossible to check manually. We'd always miss something. So this tool is run within the software, and it probably checks 80 to 90% of what's in the model in relation to the component catalog. It gives the user a list of the missing model information and a bit of a summary on the things they need to fix. That's good internally, but also our client wants us to be able to see how compliant we are. So we've taken this to the next level. We've used Power BI dashboards. We use a CDE, so we use ProjectWise as our CDE, mainly on projects, also Autodesk Construction Cloud on some. So we've written a script that runs through a data schema, and this data schema is pretty much our component catalog, but in a schema format. So it lists what we're trying to validate and check. All this information sits in the database. We connect it through an API into our Power BI dashboard. So what this actually gives us, and myself as a BIM manager on this project, is it gives us a holistic view of how compliant our models are, which then informs us how compliant we are as a project. We needed this holistic approach of seeing where we are, because without that, the size of the project we're working on, it would be very easy not to see what other people are doing. So all of our models are pushed to this dashboard every time we share them, and it gives us an ability to see basically how compliant we are. It gives us a good insight into how the teams are performing. But what it also allows us to do is, if we see a team that isn't performing, we can then address that with further training. Do they understand how they deliver LOD 400? Are there new staff that have joined and they just need the handheld for a bit? So this to us was a big game changer, to be able to see how compliant we are across a project just within the dashboard, and it's constantly updated. Means that I haven't got to go and ask people, how's your data validation going? Can you tell me what have you delivered recently? I can actually see it from one dashboard. We're also able to produce quantities. So by having that defined component catalog at the beginning of the project, we knew that our client would want quantities. They want to know how much concrete there is, how many piles have they got, how much steelwork have they got. So by defining certain criteria within that component catalog, what that allows us to do is actually put that into a dashboard. For all we know, our clients are taking these quants out and reformatting them, but we're giving them that data. We're not having to physically go into the models or run scripts, put them into an Excel file and share them with someone. Every time a model shared, this updates. So there's no one needed to actually calculate it. It's based on the information we said we provide our clients. So there's no need to open a model. If you imagine, we can say to our client, we can tell you how many piles we got. We can also tell you all the diameters. We can tell you graphically where they are on the project. So what diameters you've got. So you can then look at where your piling rigs need to be. You could even look at trying to refine the number of lengths you have, refine the number of diameters you have. But we could also go one step further. We could also say you've got this many beams. Graphically, where are they going to be? So when you're going to your precast yard, you may want to place your precast yards in a place where there's more beams. There's so much more you can do with this. And to me, this is changing just the way we work now, just making us much more efficient. So we dig a bit deeper. We then look at the components that we've created. So how do we know? It's all great having this digital library that we've prepared and we're hoping people use. But how do we know that people are actually using? How do we know they're actually just creating their own components and they're just modeling things as they've always done? So we're able to dig into, we can validate our models, and do they have the right beams in? Have they used the right component? Because we've promised our client all this information. Now, if we promise something to our client, we need to ensure we deliver it. So this other dashboard allows us to validate the components against a model. Which again, we don't even need to open them all. We can just look at a dashboard and it tells us where the beam is compliant, where the culvert is compliant, or they've even used the wrong parapet. And we can delve into that data. So what's next for us? Well, I suppose what's next and what we've started looking at recently is IFC format. IFC seems to be becoming the next big thing, open data, open file formats. So we recently undertook a project with Building Smart, a pilot project to understand how we can deliver an IFC file. Now, it's not just a right-click export. There's a lot more behind that I'm sure you're aware of already. So we partnered with Building Smart for about 3 months. We developed an IDS based on our project requirements, and now we understand this better. Where projects ask for this IFC requirement, if they're not sure what that requirement is, we can then educate them. We can say, look, these are the requirements. We need to get the requirements up front. And our future goal is to try and develop this approach and scale it globally across more projects, because more and more clients are asking for this. So by having that knowledge from Building Smart and having that pilot project with them, is giving us the ability to start educating our clients and informing them, how do we actually get this? And that's sort of our next step into our BIM delivery. So thank you for today. Happy to take any questions if there are any.